I was on the beach with everyone else. All of us in hoodie sweatshirts and flip-flops. Waiting for the grunion to run. It happens only a few times a year late at night and it goes like this. Post full moon and after high tide. The entire beach goes silver like a tiny thousand mirrors with female grunion fish riding swells onto shore and scurrying up the sand and digging in their tails. And then, males sometimes 7 or 8 at a time wrapping around the females and releasing their milt and then all of them scurrying back to the sea together leaving their eggs buried in the sand to hatch during a future post-full moon high tide. I read it in the paper at the campfire coffee shop. In one picture from last summer the whole beach was shimmering. Like a rich woman's dress going down a red carpet. Before I left the shop. Yachi, one of the workers, cut out the picture for me with scissors and now it was with me on the beach folded up and stuck inside the pages of my philosophy of life book next to the good luck tiger whisker I planned to give Kay. I flipped the book open and looked at the picture and the whisker and got excited all over again. Since the entire event was supposed to last less than a minute we were all standing around waiting. Saying how cool it was going to be. Even Ukai, my boss and Peanut the campsite dog were there. Then I looked up to the cliff. And I saw it. Tobio sitting with Kay at the top of the stairs. Talking close like flirting people talk. I choked on my breath. I almost squatted down on the not yet silver sand cause my knees went wobbly and I couldn't tell which way was up. Like when a wave takes you underneath and spins you around the ocean's washing machine. Kay and Tobio, together. The beach was sky black except for an oval moon that lit up their position on the cliff. Like stage spotlights in some romantic play. I sat off for them. My heart knocking in my chest and stomach and even my neck. My philosophy of life book shaking in my hand. I walked at first like everything was normal because I knew if Ukai thought something was happening he'd call me back. Take off his old sombrero. And fire off question after question. What's wrong big guy? You alright? Somebody stressing you out? When I made it around the bend I jogged. Then ran up the stairs 2 at a time. Thinking I had to get to him before something happened. And what if something happened? I saw them through the bushes and stopped cold. Peanut ran into the back of my leg. Tobio slowly traced the mark on Kay's cheek. The one he showed me. And him letting him. You can't do it, I said under my breath. Kay didn't turn around to look at me. But Tobio did. He stared and even got a tiny grin on his face. Get away from him. But he didn't. Instead he ran his fingers through Kay's blonde hair and leaned in to whisper something in his ear and then he kissed him a real kind of kiss. Like two people who were committed together as a couple. Kay kissed back. Somebody else's tiger whisker was already pinched between his thumb and forefinger. A shopping bag and a card by their feet in the dirt. My whole body lost its feeling and then went jumpy. Like I was freezing cold. I was in my hoodie sweatshirt and warm. I clenched my jaw to stop its chatter and made my face into steel. Then I crashed through the bushes and started marching towards them, never taking my eyes off Tobio. Who was still looking back at me even though he was kissing Kay. I stopped in front of them and Kay still didn't look at me. I was some kind of ghost that made no tracks in the sand. But then I reached out and took Tobio by the hood of his sweatshirt and moved him away from the only guy I've ever loved or ever will. I shoved him from the steps towards the part of the cliff where the fence was weakest. I should know because I fixed the whole thing with Ukai earlier in the summer. This was where we ran out of material and had to leave the old part. It's where Ukai shook his head and told me, pointing at the fence, how the only thing between some person and a 40-foot fall off the cliff to the beach, and his most likely death, was whether or not he was stupid enough to test it. I walked me and Tobio towards that test. Him by the hood of his sweatshirt and me gritting my teeth. Still clutching my philosophy of life book. Meaning this more than anything I've ever meant. Oh my god. Sho, what are you doing? I can't let anybody hurt you. Sho, you're scaring me again. When I turned and looked at him, something wild leapt in his eyes. Out of control flames that no amount of fireman's water could have extinguished or even slowed down. My heart lowered its head. Ashamed. For a second I got confused and thought maybe I'm wrong for doing this. Sho, please stop. I have to make sure you're okay. Why do you keep saying that? Nobody's hurting me. But I already had Tobio's back against the part of the fence that wasn't new and he was grinning in my face 'cause of his death drive. So here we are. I knew you'd show up. He laughed, looking down the cliff at all the people on the sand. You still don't get it, do you? All these people here, they think they're better than us. I was only half listening though, the other half still seeing Kay trembling behind me. It made me think of my mom's trembling lips when she sat across from me at the kitchen table the day I turned 10. 7 years ago, saying how I was a man now and how I deserved the truth about my genes and what was about to happen with her and my dad. I remember her long-nailed fingers digging into her own hands and her right knee bouncing up and down. The poor man's shake, Ukai calls it whenever he catches mine doing the same thing around his campfire. Usually 'cause I'm thinking about myself and if I'm good enough for Kay. My mom looked at me that birthday morning like she was telling me something brand new about my dad, and to protect her feelings I acted like I didn't know. I'll do it. I made my face into the hardest possible frown. You won't. I will. You won't. I have to. Peanut stared up at me, his tongue going and his ears standing on a point. Like it was hearing something too high for humans. Sho, stop. He took 2 short breaths. Just come back here a minute. I want to talk to you. Kay was pretending calmness now. His voice quieter and deeper and more desperate. His eyes darting in their sockets and his lip still trembling like Mom's. They may have stuck you in this special program at school. But I know you're just as smart as you ever were. She pushed loose strands of long black hair behind her ears and glanced at the ceiling, taking a deep breath. When she looked back at me, her eyes were all jittery. And building tears. This is who you are and you can never forget that. I watched the first tear slide down her cheek and fall onto the collar of her light blue shirt in a circle. That part going instantly darker. Below me and Tobio, the ocean was massive, its constant fuzzy sound and yawning onto the already wet sand and then rolling into itself. All its secrets eternally buried beneath and calm. Like Kay was pretending to be. Its whispering of how meaningless the 3 of us were above it on the cliff. The sand still not silver like the picture folded in my book, but dull and gray and sad. I stood there, gripping Tobio's sweatshirt, my philosophy of life book, on the ground now, with all my answers and me with no time to read them. Please. You won't. I have to. I drove him harder into the weak part of the fence until it broke like I knew it would. I shoved him down the cliff and watched his body bounce, tumble, fall, thud into the thick sad sand and lay motionless. And everybody who were once waiting for Grunion was now racing to his side and touching his arm and his back and his leg and looking up at the cliff at me and Kay. Peanut took off down the stairs. I studied Kay's hysterical crying face as he hurried to the edge of the small cliff and crumbled to his knees, sobbing and looking down at Tobio's limp body. No. Then looking at me and shouting my name over and over. A bad feeling slowly dripped into my stomach. I couldn't move or feel anything. But then I pictured what Ukai said. A man's got to take care of his person, and I just put it as number 5 in my philosophy of life book. That's all I did. Take care of Kay. The human crowd now gathered around Tobio. Flashlights shining and fingers pointing. Cell phones going to people's ears and Kay sobbing. His blonde hair now back under his ski cap, the flap again covering the marks on his face. My heart was hanging from the edge of the cliff by its fingertips and slipping. I stepped back and watched it all like a show on TV, and right at that second it happened. The Grunion all came from the sea. All at once they wiggled out of an especially heavy swell and rode up onto the shore, blanketing the sand like real-life glitter, and everyone who was touching him turned and watched the silverfish digging into the sand and circling around each other, and some scurrying all the way up to the people's flip-flopped feet and climbing over Tobio's motionless body. And me on Ukai's secret part of the cliff. Above everything, out of breath and in awe. Thinking how could such a good thing like a sparkling beach, next to the guy of my dreams, come at the exact same time as such a bad thing. My ex-best friend Tobio. Broken in the sand 'cause I pushed him and the sound of sirens in the distance and Kay burying his face in his hands and sobbing. Before all the silver had time to fade back into the ocean, I closed my eyes to keep freedom pictured in my head and waited for them to come take me away.